The silence was the only thing denser than the dust in Oak Park, an abandoned hospital in the forgotten Kansas countryside. For decades, it lay there, a carcass of bricks and shattered glass, swallowed by ivy and whispered stories. No one dared to go near, but that's exactly why I was there, with my camera and a recorder, seeking the truth behind the rumors. I entered through the main door, creaking like an ancient lament. My flashlight's beam danced across the peeling walls, revealing the urgency of the escape. Overturned gurneys, scattered patient files, and in some rooms, something more sinister. Dark stains on the floor that I preferred not to identify. Air was heavy, with a metallic smell mixed with mold and something that made me shiver. Perhaps the scent of despair. My goal was the psychiatric ward on the 3rd floor. They said the worst cases were kept there. I climbed the central staircase, my steps echoing like heartbeats in the void. Upstairs, the corridor was darker, broken windows with no curtains looking out onto nothingness. It was then that I saw a dot in the last room on the right. Leaning against the opposite wall was an intact patient file. I picked it up, the paper, yellowed and dusty, but the name still legible. Elara Vance. Admission date, 1948. Diagnosis, severe catatonia. And a disturbing handwritten note. Patient exhibits sporadic smiles, with no apparent stimulus. Unknown pathology. My blood ran cold. Catatonia is a state of immobility and mutism. Smiles didn't fit. It was strange, bizarre. The room itself was tiny, with a twisted iron bed and a broken chair. Nothing else. But as the flashlight beam swept the room, one thing caught my eye. On the wall beside the bed, scrawled in chalk or perhaps something more rudimentary, was a childish drawing. A smiling sun, and below it, a human face. Simple, with large eyes and a disproportionately wide smile. A sane smile the file spoke of? As I examined the drawing, a creaking sound from the corridor made me jump. It was the wind, I told myself, but the sound repeated, coming from a door further down, a door that had been closed when I passed it. I took a deep breath and, ignoring the instinct to run, followed the sound. The door led to a small, pitch-black cubicle. When the flashlight's beam illuminated it, it revealed ... a doll. An old cloth doll sitting on the floor, leaning against the wall. Its eyes were dark buttons, and its mouth was stitched into a wide, fixed smile. The same smile as the drawing on Elara Vance's room wall. The doll seemed to be watching me. The dust covering it was strangely undisturbed, as if no one had touched it for years. But the door had creaked, and there was no wind there. Suddenly, a whisper chilled the air. seeming to come from all directions at once. She never left. My heart pounded. The air turned icy cold. I wasn't alone in there. The hospital's history, the forgotten patients, the loneliness of those corridors, everything materialized. The doll's smile seemed to widen, and for an instant, I swore I saw its button eyes blink. I knew I had to get out of there. I grabbed the patient file and ran. I ran like never before, the stairs creaking under my feet, the echoes of my steps chasing me. The metallic smell intensified, almost suffocating me. When I finally reached the main door and fresh air filled my lungs, I looked back. The dark windows of Oakhart stared at me, and for a fraction of a second, on the third floor and the last window on the right, I swore I saw a figure. And the smile of the forgotten patient, which still haunted the hospital and now would haunt me. Asterisk. The race out of Oakhart wasn't the end, but the beginning. Elara Vance's patient file, crumpled in my trembling hand, became my obsession. Every word, every scribble seemed to hold a key to the terror I had just felt. Back in my apartment, with daylight giving me a false sense of security, I examined the file under a strong lamp. A medical record detailed Elara's admission in Nus 1948, her catatonia, and the mysterious smiles. But there was an extra section, a sheet added later, crudely stapled, with no date or official signature. It was a brief diary, written in hasty, almost illegible handwriting, presumably by one of the nurses or doctors. The first entries described Elara's routine. Patient Vance remains immobile. Smiled today during the night rounds, looking at the corner of the room. Further on, the tone changed. The other patients are agitated. They say Elara is calling them. Absurd. And then, panic began to seep into the words. The whispers. They don't stop. Elara smiles as they come from the wall. I hear them. The last entry was the most disturbing. He's here. The smile. He's with Elara. I saw them. I can't take it anymore. The word he was written with a feverish intensity. What was the smile? The drawing on the wall? The doll? I decided to investigate the hospital's history. I delved into old newspaper archives from small towns, dusty microfilms in rural libraries. News about Oakhart was scarce, but disturbing. In 1953, there was an inexplicable outbreak of mass hysteria among patients and staff. Cases of self-mutilation, mass escape attempts, and reports of voices and visions. The hospital was closed in a hurry, and many of the patients were transferred to other institutions, while others simply disappeared. Elara Vance was one of them. Her name did not appear on the transfer lists. One article, in particular, Caught. My attention dated 1954 about a superficial government investigation into the closure. It mentioned a single unusual incident, the discovery of a ritualistic object inside a patient's room with no apparent relation to traditional medicine, raised questions about unconventional practices. Ritualistic object. Could it be the doll? This final piece of the puzzle came from an old interview with a former nurse, published in a local newspaper decades later, when he was a very old man and apparently a little senile. He spoke of catatonic patients who sang without moving their lips, of the shadowy figures that slid through the corridors at night, and of the doll that smiled back. He described a ritual that some patients performed, drawing the smile on their own skin or on objects as an offering or a way to converse with something that wasn't there. It wasn't Elara who was catatonic, he mumbled in the interview. It was the smile. It used her. It used them all. It wanted friends. It smiled them into madness. The smile of the forgotten patient wasn't Elara Vance's smile. It was the smile of an entity, of something ancient and malevolent that had rooted itself in the pain and despair of that hospital. Elara wasn't trapped in her catatonia. She was a doorway, an interface for this thing that fed on sanity and still resided in Oak. Heart, the doll, the drawing, the whispers. Everything was part of the same ritual, a manifestation of the smile, seeking more company, more victims. And now I had the patient file. I had the truth. And the truth, I realized, was that the smile perhaps wanted me as its next friend. With the truth of the smile weighing on me, I knew I couldn't simply ignore it. The entity nestled in Oak Heart, which had used Elara Vance and so many others, now knew my name. And I had its patient file. I had its story. The most logical idea would be to destroy the file, to erase any trace of this connection. But something held me back. A morbid curiosity, perhaps, or the intuition that destruction wouldn't be the end, just a postponement. If the smile fed on sanity and despair, it wanted me. And I, as terrified as I was, felt an inexplicable urge to understand its nature, to confront it, even from a distance. I decided to use what I had discovered. I put together a complete dossier with the photos I took, the notes from the patient, file, the newspaper articles, and the transcription of the interview with the old nurse. My intention was to publish it, to expose the story of Oak Heart and warn people. After all, the light of publicity could, perhaps, ward off the shadows. I spent days and nights immersed in the material, with each line, each image, feeling the presence of the smile closer. I barely ate, barely slept, and the metallic smell of the hospital seemed to permeate my clothes, my hair. My mind, once so clear, began to play tricks on me. I heard whispers when I was alone, saw figures out of the corner of my eye. On the night, I finally finished organizing everything. I prepared the file for upload. I took a deep breath, my finger hovering over the publish button. That's when I felt a chill down my spine. It wasn't the air conditioning. It wasn't a draft. It was as if someone or something was right behind me. I spun around abruptly. The apartment was dark, lit only by the computer screen. No one was there, but on the white wall, above my head, where there had been nothing before, a chalk drawing slowly materialized. A smiling sun, and below it, a human face. Simple, with large eyes and a disproportionately wide smile. The same smile as the drawing. On Elara Vance's room wall dot, my heart leaped into my throat. The smile wasn't in the hospital. It was with me. It followed me. I jumped out of my chair, knocking it over. My eyes fixed on the drawing. It seemed to pulsate, the chalk becoming more intense, more vivid. The air grew heavy, and the metallic smell, which I thought was just psychological, was now real and suffocating. Suddenly, the voice, not a whisper, but a clear, cold voice, coming from nowhere and everywhere at once, echoing directly in my mind. You won't publish. You'll be my friend forever. And then, to my absolute horror, I felt my lips curl. It wasn't me. It was uncontrollable. A smile formed on my own face, a wide, fixed, inorganic smile that widened until my facial muscles ached. It was the smile from the drawing. It was the smile of the forgotten patient. My hands tried to reach for the patient file, which now lay on the floor, to tear it, to burn it. But my arms wouldn't respond. My entire body was paralyzed, catatonic. Just like Elara Vance, my eyes, however, were wide open, witnessing my own nightmare. The last thing I saw before consciousness began to fade was my computer screen. The file I was about to publish was still there, open. And slowly, text began to appear, typed by invisible hands, overlaying my dossier. Hello, world. This is a new patient file. My new friend. And then the monitor flickered and went dark.